Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Pink Elephant webinar around next generational service management. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I see a lot of people are still joining on the event. We'll definitely post the recording of this for any of the latecomers. However, we do have a jam-packed event today, so I just want to kick off on time. So thank you for the guys that have arrived on time. Yeah, exciting lineup. I think we've got some key topics that we want to discuss around service management today. And I think one of the components and takeaways that we should look out for is around the technology adoption within service management, the disruption of technology, and should that be welcomed for positive change in service management, and how do we adopt to where technology is going. I think one of the other elements that we're going to be covering today is around the maturity assessments. Our maturity assessments in the age-old CMMI modeling, is it really geared for the next generation of service management, or do we need to adjust the way that we're assessing our maturity for where we're going to as organizations, as service management, and as industry leaders? And I think finally, with covering process and technology, there is an element of people that must be kept at the back of mind. In every organization, there's change, and organizational change in the context of service management is significantly important. So yeah, so like I said, exciting discussions coming up for today. We've got a team of panelists that bring a wealth of experience, and I think I just want to introduce them one at a time, and I'll hand over to them. So Derek, maybe we can start with you, Principal Consultant, IT Services and Project Management. Excited to have you here, Derek. If you can just give us a brief introduction of yourself.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, I'm based in Durban, South Africa. I'm an ITSM principal consultant. I've worked in various industries in driving ITSM and driving ITSM maturity. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Derek, and we're looking forward to having you part of the discussion today. Mercedes, over to you. I know that you're a lead consultant specializing in service management and governance, so we'd love to pick your brain on some of that governance components in service management and where we're going with service management. So yeah, brief introduction from yourself, please.
Thank you very much, Asif. Good day, everyone. My name is Ms. Shady Thompson. As mentioned, I'm an ITSM lead consultant and also a trainer. I come from a core IT support role first. So with that experience, it's easily for me to take my delegates through that as well. I also do, enjoy the whole governance aspect and enjoy my consulting role. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Mercedes. And Dr. Laban, I think it's a pleasure to have you. It's an honor to have you with us to discuss some of the next generational technology adoption across Africa and how that impacts service management. So yeah, so maybe over to you if you can give us a brief introduction on yourself.
Thank you, Asif. My name is Laban Mwansa, and currently PeopleSet brand ambassador for ITU, DevOps, and Agile. So I'm at the moment based in Europe doing consultancy, sometimes training, and also helping organizations realize the current digital realities in digital transformation, aligning strategic business goals to ITSM. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for joining, Dr. Laban. And then finally, Justin Gaffney, Head of Client Operations. I think significantly important as to how we're bridging the worlds between service management and service delivery. So yeah, Justin, if you can give us a brief introduction in yourself.
Thank you, Asif. Justin Gaffney. I work for a fashion apparel and homeware retailer in South Africa. We run about 3,000 stores. The portfolio of services that I look after, which is pertinent to the conversation today, is I look after the IT service management function, as well as the technical support desk, as well as the IT support for all over 3,000 stores in Southern Africa.
Great. Thanks for that, Justin. Yeah, and I think welcome to all of the panelists. Looking forward to an interesting conversation. We encourage the audience and the attendees to post your questions also on the chat, and we'll try and get through those questions as quick as we can. I think one of the key things around having a live webinar is the opportunity for us to be able to answer questions on the go. So yeah, we're really looking to an engaging discussion from the team. Thank you, Julian. I see Julian's joined, running an agile class at the moment. Looking forward to that engagement from the class as well, Julian. Yeah, so I think one of the parts that we obviously want to start off with today is understanding the next gen of IT service management. So in traditional service management, we understand that there's a lot of approaches as well as frameworks that was traditionally applied. However, how would you define, Mercedes, what is the next gen service management for the audience and the attendees that have joined us today?
Okay, I think the next gen of ITSM is really focusing on, intelligent, human-centered service delivery or IT service delivery, as well as looking at it from a more agile approach, right? Whereas the traditional approach focus more on, reactive, heavy process-driven ITSM, right? But it basically provided us with the structure we required back then. But I feel like right now our ITSM organizations require more. And there's three key things that will assist, or rather that stands out for me when it comes to a next gen ITSM. The first one is focusing on XLA, and that's basically experience level agreements, right? Um, we know that what's the driving force currently is service level agreements, right? Focusing on us just meeting those SLAs. And I'm not saying we need to get rid of it, but I'm highlighting from a next gen perspective is basically building on to that by adding experience level agreements as well. Questioning ourselves, yes, we're meeting our SLAs, but how does our customers perceive the value that we are deriving? Are they happy with the way we're delivering our services, right? So it shouldn't just be a tick box exercise in us focusing on the process, but also taking the human factor into consideration. Secondly, I would say AI and automation is also going to play a powerful role in next gen ITSM, because it will then now allow us to build the functionalities of self-healing systems, getting rid of those repetitive tasks, and also just ensuring that, again, our customers do derive value as quickly as possible. And then lastly, I would say when we do build these services or products and services for our customers, let's focus on developing solutions around agility, right? Where DevOps and Agile, as well as value stream management, becomes the center of the way we're delivering these services. Again, ensuring that the people aspect is catered for and values being derived for all parties involved. Okay. So I know you might be thinking that we're getting rid of the traditional approach, and that's not the case, because ITIL advises this as well. We would merely just be building on to the foundation that the traditional approach has provided us with. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mercedes. Yeah, I think some key insights, and I like the way that you structured it over those three components as to what's driving. And Dr. Laban, I think in your introduction, you've also mentioned that digital transformation is one of the components that is on everyone's lips these days. So maybe if I can shift this conversation over to you in terms of what do you believe is part of the digital transformation evolution that's driving ITSM towards the next generational service management today?
I think, rightly said, the next gen ITSM is moving towards enhanced automation, enhanced AI, and also what I can say machine learning. Because if we look at statistics, one of them done by some insights by Axelos, I think 3 years ago, you see that I think ITSM is no longer just incident management. It's more than that, in the sense that we want to leverage technology, also the advancement of self-help portals, which is actually decongesting the help desk kind volumes of tickets. And you see that from my experience, most organizations, the first thing they would opt for is, of course, service desk, then incident management. But we realize that with the next gen in the pipeline, a lot of virtual agents are going to leverage and also help users to resolve reactively as well as proactively, resolve some of the issues experienced by users. So this is quite important to note. And also, if you look at the stats provided by Axelos, who used to manage ITU, and now it's moved to PeopleSet, you see that they did a global survey that the uptake, adoption, the leading uptake is service desk at the moment. And with the next gen automation and machine learning, we expect decongestion of most volumes of tickets from service desk by the use of virtual chat box and machine learning, which is actually streamlining the resolution of tickets, work notes, as well as knowledge base.
Thank you for that, Dr. Laban. I think that was well put in terms of what is the elements from service desk as well as the different components within service management that can really bring us towards that next generational offering. And I think when we speak about offering, it's key to understand that we exist as IT as part of a larger business, right? And as part of a larger business, what we want to know is how does IT then add value to organizations? And I think, Justin, you probably primed for this question in that how do you believe that we as service management experts have moved beyond aligning ITSM with the broader business objectives? Do we still keep the business objectives key of mind or top of mind when we're delivering service management, and how do you believe we do so?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think here at TFG, I think we're very fortunate. We've actually dropped the IT part of ITSM, and we now refer to the service management. And the reason behind that is from a maturity perspective, we've actually rolled out service management across multiple functions, not just from an IT perspective. So if I take a look at it, it started off from an ITSM perspective, but we've rolled it out to HR service management. We have a finance service management component, and as well as facility service management. So I think in terms of that, we've expanded the scope from just purely being an ITSM product and then trying to move it over to incorporate other business processes. And this obviously aligns with the business objectives, because the business objectives aren't to make IT services more user-friendly and more efficient. It's to make things more efficient for your customer overall. So I think from that perspective, that's the approach that TFG have taken. And I think when you look at the trends that kind of have driven that, a lot of automation and AI, as Laban and Mercedes mentioned, but almost central to this is a customer centricity approach. And I think from our perspective, it's we try to offer a singular service that's uniform across. So whether you're speaking to someone about a facilities issue, a finance issue, an IT issue, or an HR issue, it all comes through the same approach and gets dealt with through the same service from that perspective. So it's a lot easier for your users to engage. It's a lot easier for them to track. And it's a lot more efficient from a team perspective on the back end.
Thanks for that, Justin. I think the take that I get from that is obviously ITSM is evolving towards what the end customer is expecting us to do. And I think we know that end customer has changed. The business users have changed. And because of that, service management as a whole needs to adjust and adapt towards that. And I think maybe, Derek, from your experience here, in order for service management to adjust and adapt, one of the key that we need to look at is maturity, right? What is our levels of maturity, and how do we then adapt towards what is next generational service management? So from your experience, can you provide us with some insights as to that process for understanding the common signs that organizations are not ready for next gen service management adoption?
Thank you very much, and that's a great question, because there are several signs that I've seen in my years. I'll just focus on a few. I think one of the key ones is people. And where I refer to people, I'm referring to the learning, the skilling, the development, where we've seen training is not a high priority, or where guidance is not given to staff or to people to implement the training. We staff are not trained on ITSM, cloud, automation, or AI concepts that is now clearly coming through. The second part for me is process ownership. I've seen many companies implementing processes, but where there's a lack of accountability and ownership, organizations haven't clearly defined ownership, or where there's no clear lines of responsibilities throughout the process, from implementing to going through the various steps to monitoring, applying the changes in the organization that is relative to the organization. So I think process ownership is one of the areas where we see that organizations are not ready. Technology. The best designed processes will fail if the supporting technology is not well suited, or there has been a poor implementation. I've seen many cases where tools are purchased before the processes are actually implemented, which generally leads to a misalignment. And naturally so, these tools become problematic. I think the fourth area for me, and probably one of the key and areas that drives, that drives this issue, is leadership, and what we measure as leaders. So leadership is important in driving the right metrics, the incentives. Well-defined processes can break down if leadership overrides the process themselves, by rewarding rapid fixes versus following a well-defined process. And then I think the fifth one for me is strategic alignment. I've seen many cases where the ITSM is not aligned to the business goals, what the business needs and what the business wants to achieve. Many cases I've seen companies implementing processes from a textbook exercise, and not just driving it from what the business needs or what the business goals are and what the customer requirements are. So if I had to put it into a nutshell, I think those are the 5 common areas that I would see. It's people and the training that's related to that, process ownership, technology, having the right tools, implementing the tools, leadership, driving the right metrics, and then ensuring there's alignment between ITSM and the business goals. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Derek. And I believe that you would have derived those 5 key components from a maturity assessment. And I think a lot of the attendees in the audience as well would have the same questions as to how do they assess the organization to understand their maturity levels, as well as how do we understand where we're falling short towards recommending priorities and roadmaps in implementing areas that we feel are falling short. And Dr. Laban, I know that you also mentioned something very similar earlier on. So in your experience, you've obviously done these assessments in terms of maturity assessments, and you've obviously provided recommendations to organizations. Typically, where do you find that organizations are falling short at the moment when it comes to these maturity assessments and how they're implementing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we will single out organizational culture, where you find that most teams are siloed. Like you find the ops team that side, the development team that side, and they have what we call invisible war, throwing emails across to each other. There is lack of collaboration. That's my most important finding, is lack of collaboration is mostly misconstrued with lack of communication. You can communicate but not collaborate. For example, operations team and development team need to have kind of open dialogue, sit together and look at problems realistically rather than exchange of blame. The ops team normally is blaming the development team, and development team blaming the ops team, and there it goes. And this is one of the problems which is actually manifesting at the moment in most industries. And the other one is over-reliance of on service level agreements. And we move into a situation where employees and customer satisfaction is playing a key role in ITSM, and most industries need to move towards balancing SLAs and XLAs, user experience, so that they can strike a realistic balance between the two. So this, coupled with another finding, is that most frameworks which are based on ITSM are not utilized, like dashboards are not utilized to the full capacity, and which maybe hinges on lack of training, organizational culture, like learning culture in the organization, also collaborative learning culture, and also agility, like enterprise agility moves in as well, that every part of the organization must be able to ask himself, herself, what value am I adding to the organization? And that calls for mindset change, organizational change. Every organization has got a different culture, unfortunately. But if we move towards next gen, we move towards eliminating the shortfalls highlighted, then we need a clear mindset change in this aspect. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Dr. Laban. Yeah, and I think that experience is valuable in the way that we assess, as well as the way that we implement some of these solutions. I know, Mercedes, you're currently busy with the ping scan across multiple different clients. And maybe just a quick one-liner around what role does ITSM assessments really assist in helping organizations understand their readiness towards this migration. I think there's some questions also from the audience that's asking the question in terms of the next-gen service management component. How do we know whether our organization is ready, or how do we ensure that we get our organizations ready towards that evolution of service management?
I think, thanks, Asif. I think the different assessments really does play an important role, especially from a ping scan perspective. It allows an organization to perform a current state assessment of their standings, where they really get to reflect on where they currently are, right? That allows them to draw the baseline, which in turn then allows us to identify the gaps within the organization. And then also, ping scan basically provides us with a structured approach to benchmarking, okay? You know, at the end of the day, when organizations are performing these assessments, firstly, they have already identified that there's a requirement for change, okay? And they also need this change to be implemented as quickly as possible. So by using ping scan, we are able to identify these gaps using the structured approach. And with those gaps, we are able to identify quick wins, right? Which then allows us to implement, you know, those fixes as quickly as possible, allowing the business to derive value as quickly as possible, okay? It also then allows us the opportunity to build long-term successes. We've spoken about how it is important to implement agility into the new way of thinking from an ITSM perspective. So ping scan does allow us to come up with a roadmap, as I mentioned, from a quick fix perspective, as well as long-term, ensuring that the business is consistently evolving. Because if we think about it, you know, next gen should not be seen as just a destination, but rather as an opportunity to constantly evolve and improve the way we operating as an as ITSM organizations across the board. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Mercedes, and thank you for closing it off with that statement. I think next gen is not the destination, but it's rather the way in which we evolve towards the services that we're delivering. I think that's powerful. There was a question from one of the audience members in terms of the success of the implementation through next gen IT models, and what does a success look like, and is there success stories? I think understanding the concept of what next-gen is towards who you want to implement it with and what components within the next-gen service management you want to implement, that is a success story. So if you're moving from an SLA towards an XLA, and the reason behind that is because you want to get towards customer centricity, then that's part of the journey. So implementing those models in silos or in small pieces allows you to start that journey forward. And I think, Justin, you're obviously part of an organization that has begun with this journey. What has been your success story, or what has been your experience around the next gen implementation, and what can you share with the audience around that real world example?
Yeah, so I think maybe just to lead on from Mercedes' conversation, I think where we started is we had a call to action. The service being delivered internally from an IT service management perspective was poor. We did have a lot of escalations from an executive perspective, a lot of feedback from stores. We engaged with Pink Elephant. We went through a Pink Scan perspective. We got the levels of maturity of certain things, but I think very quickly we realized that our old ITSM service was not going to enable us to make that step change to move into where we wanted to be from a customer service perspective. So I think from that perspective, we obviously went on a sourcing journey. I think internally came through a lot of requirements, went through, narrowed it down, did a couple of visits with actual customers that were using it, and then we settled on fresh service. I think on our journey, whilst it hasn't been 100 out of 100 in terms of delivery, I think we probably at about an 80 out of 100. But it is a continual journey where we had to almost cherry pick the items that were going to deliver the most benefit as soon as possible. So I think if you take a look at what we've migrated from, we used to log tickets via telephone and email, so very unstructured, very hard to analyze those and to get a quick mean time to repair. Where we are now is the initial presentation is through a chatbot. We do still have telephony as a channel, web chat and WhatsApp. The web chat and WhatsApp follows the exact same user journey, so very structured, usually gets that straight through to the required teams as quickly as possible. And then we do have a self-service function as well. And I think it is one of those things where users, you have to engage with your users to find out what their requirement is, because some people prefer speaking to someone on a phone, and other people will prefer logging chats. So I think from that perspective, we are on that journey. I wouldn't say that we've made the transition across fully into a next-gen ITSM, but we're definitely on that journey. And from a team perspective, we go through regular sprints, enabling even more technology, so moving across more and more systems and businesses into the next-gen ITSM service.
Thanks for the, Justin. I think it's really valuable speaking to somebody that's part of the journey already, and understanding exactly what are some of the pros as well as some of the challenges that you're having on the ground. So maybe just a follow-on question from my side is around what would you say are some of the challenges that you're finding when trying to modernize service management in the way that you're trying to do so now?
Yeah, very, very good question. So I think there's the old adage that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So I think resistance to change and the cultural barriers around that are critical, because people they aren't going to make the change from their existing daily processes and the way that they operate unless there's something driving that. So I think going hand in hand with the cultural barriers is executive buy-in. So you need to have that leadership drive so that everyone can see that this project has executive sponsorship and is being pushed. I think probably the next one, if I had to look at our implementation, was legacy system integration. So looking at integrating legacy systems into our modern ITSM platform, there were a couple of challenges there. And then I think probably the fourth one would be a resource and cost constraint. I think not everyone has deep pockets and resources, infinite resources, so that they can implement this as quickly as possible. They obviously, I think from our perspective, we had a number of resources that were doing an operational workload as well as project workload. So that did mean that from a timing perspective, it needed to move out. But I think the cost and resource constraints is also a very big one. Then, as Derek and Dr. Laban mentioned, I think the skills gaps and training needs is also very, very key. And actually, it's almost to preempt that. You need to have those kind of, well, what are the requirements going to be for those people in the next 6 to 12 months? And preempting it and getting them on doing the training and filling those skills gap as quickly as possible. I think, and then the last one, which I did mention before this, is almost tool selection and vendor lock-in. I think vendor lock-in is something that happens quite frequently these days. So it probably is something to watch. And I think a lot of the next generation ITSM services are all cloud-based. So it's all an OpEx cost, usually based on a time frame. So, it is something which you do need to consider when you are looking at some of the challenges that you face moving from one service to another.
Thanks for that, Justin. I think, yeah, that's key. I think the way in which you highlighted the tools, and one of the audience members as well is mentioning the selection around tool set and ensuring that you have that right level of buy-in, both from the vendor as well as from the organization, to make sure that they're adopting the tools the way that it should. I think in one of the questions that I want to transition over to Derek with is, because of your experience in project management, how have you identified solutions, or have you identified solutions within your project management experience that will help us to be able to assist organizations in adopting these new models of service management or ITSM tools, and how they're actually adopting the usage of them?
I think from a project management perspective, one is clear. You need to understand what is required and engaging with the customer to be clear and what is required. But there's a couple of things I want to focus on, and Justin mentioned some of these challenges. He spoke about culture, executive buy-in, and integration, and resource constraints. These factors, are critical, and when adopting these ITSM models, some of this, concerns is what Justin mentioned can stem from the fear or the lack of understanding what value ITSM can bring. And I think also from a project management perspective is understanding what is required and understanding what value ITSM can bring. And for me, it's clear that we need to establish a vision. They need to understand what is the business case, clear what is the, understand the why. Why is ITSM required? Why is the next gen of ITSM required? And how will that transform to business value? For example, how can ITSM enable better and faster services? How can ITSM provide better customer experience? How can it drive cost efficiencies? Justin mentioned, and he spoke about the resource constraints. And I think then once we understand the why, it's that continuous engagement and understanding the stakeholders. From the time we implement an ITSM model, it is from the conceptual phase, as what I mentioned early on, the planning, through the designing, the piloting, the prototyping, testing, right through to implementation. I think another important factor is empowering change champions who can advocate the ITSM models. Someone who acts as the catalyst, the communicator, the connector, someone that can help bridge the gap between the strategic intent and what's actually executed on the ground. Champions help localize change. They understand the team dynamics, the challenges, the culture, etc. And then, as what we do in project management also, we identify What are those quick wins? What are those things that we can implement and we can get some reward from it, and we can let the customer see the value in it, right? So I think implementing, identifying certain quick wins, and as I've mentioned earlier on, bringing in people and bringing in the training and upskilling people, it will help drive that challenges that we experience. I've also mentioned earlier on that we spoke about culture, and some of the panel mentioned, I think Dr. mentioned culture. And that culture stems and driven from the senior leaders who can drive and enforce the importance of these initiatives. Um, you know, the other areas that I can also speak about is governance. Using a governance structure to track progress, adjust performance metrics. We spoke about, Mercedes spoke about SLA, moving to XLA, where we focus now on the customer, not just on what we are delivering as IT. There's also, ITIL has brought out a number of guiding principles, and the two guiding principles that I can think of is collaborate and promote visibility. Continuous engaging and showing what we are doing and how and what value it actually brings to the organization. And then progress iteratively and provide feedback. Do a little bit, have some quick wins, go back to the customer, engage, understand, how things are working and what value it is actually bringing. I think companies also should then, as an overall, ITSM and moving to the next gen is quite a change for many organizations. So I think driving change management, where there is a structured change management framework. I think it's one of the areas where companies should adopt and try and bring all this together, because it's a change. It's a change in business, it's a change in way we are doing things. So I think having a structured change management framework would be key. So those are the number of areas I think that we can help address these challenges and help overcome, the fear or the lack of understanding of driving ITSM and ITSM next generation.
Thanks for that, Derek. And I see there's quite a few audience that's agreeing with you in terms of the people, culture, and change, ensuring that we have people along with us on this journey and not just as service management and ITSM, almost prescribing what these processes should look like and expecting people to adopt. So it's important that that level of awareness and adoption in the organization follows your organizational change management frameworks, making sure that you get people involved in the design of the frameworks, design of the processes, gathering that feedback. I think XLA works from a customer perspective, but importantly enough, internally as well, making sure that internally we are meeting the level of communication and collaboration that promotes organizations that work towards a specific goal. No, that's amazing. So I think I want to change the conversation about a bit. And I know that in the previous comments we spoke about technology or we touched on technology. And I know Dr. Laban, you're excited about this next question. But before I get to you, I just want to answer maybe a question from Brandon in the audience around the Halo ITSM solution that's currently being implemented. I think Pink Elephant is doing the implementation. And the question is Halo ITSM recommended from a maturity level perspective? I think from a Pink Elephant perspective, we definitely look at Halo ITSM as an enabler towards next generational maturity. The organization, the people, the training, the awareness, all of that plays a big role in it. But you need a tool that can enable you. And certainly from a AI, from a predictive analytics, from the way in which service management is adopting and integrating the various components within service management, it is a disruptor. But as with many disruptors, I think email was a disruptor in the past, AI, these are all that if you use the tool in conjunction with the people and the processes, that's where you see the most value. So it's important that in implementation, you understand what your quick wins are. It's important that within your implementation, you understand what is it that you want to try and achieve within your organization and use the tool to achieve those objectives. So yeah, definitely hope that question clarifies it, but happy to get into a further conversation with you, Brandon. So maybe over to you, Dr. Laban. How do emerging technologies like AI, automation, and self-service? I mean, self-service is one of those components that most IT organizations or most organizations have implemented through portals. How do they impact the ITSM landscape at the moment? And what are your suggestions around how do we ensure that these continue to make a impactful change in the ITSM landscape?
Yeah, that's a good question. And before maybe I address it, I can just allude to the fact of my experience with ServiceNow. Actually, my experience was during the COVID area where we remotely deployed services like incident management, problem management, and firstly, what customers face is out of the box or customization, what choice to choose. And most customers, in my experience, were going for customization. So we start with workshops, understanding the requirements, and involve, a full-fledged team of business analysts, architect, developer, and product owner from the customer side. And then so each service enablement is actually a project in that sense. And then after understanding the requirements through analysis, and then we do design the architecture. And ServiceNow is friendly to customization, including now what is now AI. Which is supporting resolution of of issues. Also, it's supporting creating a knowledge base after resolution of that issue. So most of the tasks from the users is being moved to the AI agents. At least I know for ServiceNow, that's happening already. And which means that, like I mentioned earlier on, this is offloading the service desk and also relying on, the chat boxes, chat summaries. So I would say that, like the service desk, to some extent, 30% or so work has been reduced, which enables agents now, people to concentrate on more maybe risk-based change management, whereby for high-risk changes, you follow procedure. Low-risk changes can be handled by intelligent agents. And this can also be predictive as well as proactively supporting the intelligent service delivery. And this is exactly where we are moving, that all autonomous repetitive tasks are now can be automated. Things like approvals, password resets, no longer require human intervention, which makes it much more a digital reality than just having a traditional way of ITSM. So in short, integration of AI and machine learning is taking a center stage. So thank you.
Thanks for that, Dr. Lavan. I think that that's an important component or important discussion around the differences between your out-of-the-box implementation across service management tool sets versus the customization of the tool. Obviously, the tool set provides us, as we know, with the frameworks as well as how to implement things like incident change requests, etc. However, the customization of the business process is significantly important because you can be mature in terms of best practice, but if you're not aligning to what that framework, what the business requires, you're still missing the boat. I think what we've identified in terms of some of these implementations is to figure out the elements that are required from a business perspective. So in recent experience, we found that proactive and consistent support is one of the things that organizations are looking for, or end user centricity or data-driven insights. If you know those are the elements that you're looking for within your business strategy, then customizing your process and your tool to achieve those objectives. And I think that then aligns back from your technology through to your people and process. From a next generational service management technology or platforms, Derek, what role do you believe ITSM platforms play in that function?
No, absolutely. I think ITSM plays a key and a central role enabling the next generation. Dr. Laban mentioned some of the things like change management, where the platforms can help with enabling easier change management in the sense of automating low-end changes, but also, simple ticketing into more intelligent, automated, value-based that support the business, the agility, the resilience, and the innovation. So absolutely, the ITSM platform plays a key role. I've mentioned automating and integrating service delivery across the business, from IT, um, across business functions such as HR, finance, security, facilities, etc. Furthermore, ITSM platform brings the enablement of integration and AI and automation, as what we've mentioned early on. Things like chatbots, virtual agents can enable predictive incident management and simple auto routing. Removing tasks away from the service desk. That drives generally faster services and at most times I get a better customer experience.
Yeah.
In customer experience, I think further to that, offers the tools, offer simple self-service portals, mobile first interfaces, etc. And then I think there's integration into other frameworks and other methodologies, like DevOps and agile methodologies. The convergence of ITSM with DevOps and Agile practice, demands these platforms that support this continuous integration, deployment, and monitoring. And then I think the final point for me is the importance of the ITSM platforms and how they enable is, facilitating and enabling collaboration, bringing in knowledge management that supports, for me, faster onboarding, knowledge, knowledge retention, etc. Especially in organizations, I know where the knowledge management and knowledge capabilities are there to help people coming into the organization, help people understand how services work, understand where there are challenges, how they manage those, and help an organization just with faster onboarding through their platforms. The platforms can enable this. So I think, yeah, those are the key things for me that can ITSM and the need for an ITSM platform.
Great stuff. Thanks for that. So maybe just to change it up a bit again, I know that we've got quite a few of the audience members that are from leadership roles in different organizations. And Justin, from your experience, how important is it for leaders to buy into the drive of next generation service management or the transformation of service management?
Yes, if it's critical. I think without senior leadership buy-in, you are not even in the blocks for the race. And I think the reason behind that is multifold. I think firstly, leadership are the owners of culture and the drivers of culture in an organization. So without their buy-in, people at the lower down structures are just going to look at it and go, well, why do I actually need to do this? I think the second one is that from a resources and cost and finance perspective, usually an indication of what is important is given by the allocation of those costs, and the leaders typically do run those. So I think from that perspective, unless you have leadership buy-in, I actually wouldn't start with an ITSM transformation. It's critical that the leadership are involved.
Thanks for that, Justin. I think, Mercedes, you've been in a few of these processes or changes within organizations. For leaders, what would you say is the recommendation, or how do they ensure cultural shifts to make sure that the organization fully embraces this next generation of service management in the way that service management is adopting?
Thanks for that, Asif. There's quite a number of things that we can look at, with adopting the cultural shift when it comes to ITSM. Firstly, I think as leaders, we also just need to look and question ourselves. Basically, firstly, relook how IT sees itself, and also kind of structure IT more as an enabler rather than just a supporting function. Okay, I think that's the number one thing. And as you mentioned, if there's no leadership or there's no buy-in from that perspective, we don't see it happening at all. Okay, so after repositioning IT as an enabler, there's also a number of key things that I would be looking at. So leaders need to really move away from being process driven and also just look at putting our people first. Like I said earlier on, take the experience and our people's perception into consideration as well when implementing the changes. Secondly, I would say as leaders, we need to really encourage knowledge sharing and collaboration. One of the struggles that most organizations are basically dealing with is siloed operations. Okay, so again, we need to be encouraging cross collaboration from an holistic perspective, getting our people to work together. I always tell my delegates, it when we understand what we do as an individual and how it fits into what business is trying to achieve, the way we carry out our roles and responsibilities changes completely. So we understand the different touch points within the organization. So that is us just encouraging cross collaboration across the board. And then I would also say an organization should, move away from being a break fix shop, where you're firefighting most of the time, but rather focusing on continual improvement. Okay. I always also say continual improvement should form part of the organization's values. It should form part of the fiber of the organization, right? Whatever you do, always go back, reflect, and find better ways of doing it. As I said earlier on, don't look at ITSM Next Gen as a destination, but look at it as you consistently evolving, and continual improvement is definitely going to assist with you getting there. And then lastly, I would say, as leaders, let's just also move away from command and control, but let's focus on empowering our people and also trusting that they will be able to carry out and perform at the level that we require to do. So again, it goes back to knowing your people, taking the time to actually build relationships, understand, what is of value for all people involved, not only from a customer perspective, but those relationships with leaders and the employees as well, and then just driving it ahead. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mercedes. I think that's some key points that you've highlighted there around advice. Don't command and control, rather be involved in that journey. Maybe just staying with you for a second, Mercedes, what does the future of ITSM look like? I mean, over the next 3 to 5 years, how can organizations stay ahead of this curve, and what does it look like in your mind?
I see it as, the whole hype around AI and automation. 3 to 5 years from now, I actually see people accepting it as our tools of trade. I really see us evolving in that direction where we have automation, again, as mentioned by our other panelists earlier, on, where we're dependent on automation, just getting rid of our repetitive task, allowing self-healing systems to also provide services as quickly as possible, and just ensuring that, value is being derived across the board. I also see experience centric being more of a matrix. As I said earlier on, just building on to SLAs as well as experience level agreements. And then lastly, I really do see a convergence of IT service management, also looking at agile, DevOps, and as I mentioned earlier on, just the centralization of our IT value stream management, okay? Because that's how we ensure that we're constantly deriving value for our customers. So adopting next gen ITSM, I really see us moving in that direction. But as mentioned, 3 to 5 years from now, there will not be this fear that it is here to, make IT teams obsolete. I think people will then now realize it's not here to eliminate, rather more than elevate, because when we get to free up our resources to focus on more high impacting activities, we get more work done, and value is, like I said, values would then be derived overall across the board. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mercedes. So we've got an interesting question from Cindy in the audience. I think the question from Cindy, and I'll read it out, is what advice can you give to ITSM resources and government governance teams towards showing ITSM value to leadership? Maybe if I can just take that one for a second, and I think it leads me to my next question. The value is really shown by the metrics and the measurements that Mercedes touched on as well, is being able to understand exactly what is it that you're trying to measure, and then being able to demonstrate that back to the organization, whether it be user centricity or proactive support or the use of data, understanding what's important to the organization, creating that metric and adapting that metric into your service management frameworks. I think that's a good way of showing value and getting the buy-in. But don't do everything at once. Choose, be very selective in terms of what you're prioritizing so that you can demonstrate the value in that specific area. I believe that would be important to the organization in their larger objectives. So maybe, Derek, a question for you then is, how should organizations measure the success of this transformation? What measurements do you see would be
Yeah.
important towards measuring the success of transformation?
Well, thank you. And I think just touching on what you were saying, it's what's important is to measure is what the company actually needs, all right, and using that. But for me, it's measures and understanding what is required from a measuring and what they should measure. It's a balanced approach. For me, I think there's four key areas. It's evaluating the performance across the service delivery and what it's enabling and the value that it is bringing out to the business. It's measuring the customer and the user experience, right? Measuring the process and the capabilities and the process maturity. Mercedes spoke about the process maturity early on. And then I think it's also defining the business value and what that means for the organization. So I see it in those four areas where organizations can measure for success, driving XLAs, as we mentioned early on, using the customer experience, again, not just from an SLA, and I've mentioned it again, from a user experience point of view, focusing on the employee and the customer, not just on driving incidents and driving speed as for resolution. Then the third one, as part of the process maturity, I think it is driving the performance of processes and conformance. So it's the performance and the conformance relating to process alignment. How are you aligning your processes to your business and to your business objectives? And then I think the last one is measuring business value by understanding a cost of a ticket. That's where the value comes in. That's where you start seeing, what am I spending on? And based on what I'm spending on, what am I getting out of it? What's it costing me? And how do I manage and drive down those costs? All I can say, it takes time to put these measures in place. But through the tools and the capabilities that we've got, I think putting these measures in place, again, performance, looking at the customer experience, looking at the processes and the process maturity, and measuring the value that is deriving, the business derives from, will be the four key areas I would say organizations need to use to measure the adoption or the use of ITSM.
Thanks for that, Derek. Maybe just a final question for you, Justin. One piece of advice you could give organizations that are considering taking this journey towards the next-gen service management?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, I'm going to be trying to be as short as sweet, is trying to align it to the business objectives. Because if you align to the business objectives, you're going to have executive buy-in. And I think that speaks to your earlier point when you're pushing things up. If you can show that ITSM delivers and answers some of the business objectives, I think you're going to be in a winning situation.
Great. Thanks for that. Question for the audience, a final question. Maybe just post your key takeaway that you've derived from today's panel discussion. And then, yeah, if I can start with you, Dr. Laban, any key takeaway that you've taken out of today's discussion?
Oh, yes. Like Derek mentioned, I think one important aspect is that, especially for organizations embarking on next gen, that they should projectize this implementation in terms of portfolio and projects, so that the projects will be like the vehicle to deliver the change. You'll be forced to measure what has changed after the implementation of the project. it will be tempting, of course, to run it as business as usual. But my experience and advice is all the practices in IT should be handled as projects so that we can measure them in terms of user centricity and also SLA, like other panelists mentioned. And then that will provide a key fixed point for measurement. And this, will trickle down from senior management. They will realize the benefits, business benefits, which can be aligned to business goals. In terms of value.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dr.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think amazing insights. Thank you for that. Mercedes, maybe just 1 or 2 words there on your key takeaways.
Okay, my key takeaways are basically just constantly, educating businesses before, jumping into solution mode, just to perform those assessments, to really understand what their pain points are, understand what those gaps are, and when they really do make a decision as to a way moving forward, that there really is alignment, so that, at the end of all the projects that are taken on, value is being derived. So that's my key takeaways. Just constantly educating and showing the value that Ping Scan or the other assessment tools out there will provide.
Great stuff. Thanks for that, Mercedes. And over to you, Derek.
Yeah, I think it was clear for me from this discussion that ITSM has moved beyond IT. We spoke a lot about aligning back into business objectives, driving, data-driven incentives, and looking at XLAs, business agility, etc. And I think the last key point is taking people on this journey. That's key.
Great stuff. Thanks for that, Derek. I think thank you, everyone. Thank you to the panelists for your amazing contribution and your valuable insights. Thank you to the audience and the attendees for the questions that you've posed and the engaging session that we've had. I think just in conclusion, we as Pink Elephant, we understand this daunting task of evolution and ensuring the relevance while staying true to the core components of service management. As part of our almost offering back to the market, I think there's a QR code that's going to come up on your screen shortly. Go ahead and scan that QR code. We're happy to get you in a room with the ITSM experts and consultants to answer some of the key questions that you've got. I think there's nothing better than in today's day and age being part of a community, being part of a forum that which people are sharing ideas, sharing thoughts, and being able to leverage off each other's experience. So it will be amazing to speak to you. I think set up that session with us, and we're looking forward to to answering some of the questions that you have. Thank you everyone for joining, and looking forward to further engagements. Thanks everyone. Bye.